Now, when I ask friends and people who watch these videos what I should cover, one thing that always ends up coming up, and this is no surprise, right? But is Danish girls and dating in Denmark. And that is a epic minefield, I would say. So I've been a little bit hesitant. So I'll dabble in it a little bit in this video, but be patient and remember, I'm talking in generalities, and every individual, of course, is their own story. What is very interesting about dating in Denmark is that you fundamentally have to understand that Danish culture and gender norms and gender culture is very different than anywhere else in the world outside of perhaps the rest of the Nordics. If I was a woman, I don't think that there's any country that I would rather be in than Denmark, because of the gender equality, because of the level of safety, and just the overall nature of Danish society. But what's interesting is that perhaps as a result of this, or in tandem, or in parallel to this, many of the gender roles that we take for granted in many other countries are flip-flopped somewhat. And that can make dating very complicated for internationals to come to Denmark, and it can be very baffling. It also tends to restructure components of how Danish society operates. It's very, very uncommon, for example, here in Denmark, for women under the age of 30 to have been out on traditional dates. I apologize for the background sound. It's Copenhagen Jazz Week, and it sounds like they're starting to play. But I have many of my female friends here. They've never been out on a traditional movie style date, and these are beautiful women they've gone on. It's not they've been in a committed relationship since they were 17. It's just that hasn't been part of the culture, and I think that goes back to in part the gender equality, and if they do go out on a date, it's not a traditional date. Quite often it's expected that they go Dutch, or even a lot of times the women will pick up the bill for the date here. So from an American perspective, or a British perspective, or perhaps an Italian perspective, that's very different. That's very, very unusual, very atypical, and it may make some would really appreciate that. But it could make some men quite uncomfortable, and you see some of that in some of the friction. There's a lot of material from these self-styled pickup artists, kind of sleazy assholes, excuse my language, that have come to Denmark, and all of their tricks and manipulations that tie into a lot of the cultural psychology and sociology in most other countries. They don't work here. And that's because these gender roles are flipped in many areas, or they're confounded, let's say. So what that means, if you're out at the bars or you're socializing, it means that it's just as acceptable and just as common for a woman to approach a man, or for a woman then to express her interest in leaving with the man versus vice versa. So you get much less of that cat and mouse game that you have in the U.S. Or most other countries, where the men are these, I would describe them essentially as aggressors, these pursuers. You're going hunting, you're out there, that's kind of what you're after. Which is not to say that you don't have elements of that here. And there is still, I would say, dominant responsibility on the male to initiate. But where typically in the U.S. And many other countries, there's a banter where the man is trying to impress the woman, while simultaneously cutting her down just enough so that she needs to prove herself to him to engage. You have that with very, very young Danes, and I think that plays into some very basic human psychology when it comes to mating behavior and gender studies. But very quickly that kind of evaporates, to the point where the dating game for men with Danish girls is much more, be funny, be cute, be sweet. Don't tease, don't get aggressive, don't be aggressive or assertive or overly persistent. In the same way, and that can be very, very interesting, because what it means is that a lot of the things that typically would work outside of Denmark, with the teasing and the banter and that back and forth, the Danish girls won't tolerate whatsoever. But at the same time, parallel to that, it seems that the best way to win over many Danish girls is to initiate, and then basically, especially if you're at a bar, you just have to hang in there. Don't get yourself written off. So be sweet. Don't have any really strong opinions. Definitely don't disagree with her to any strong extent. I mean, like, real mild disagreement is good. Because if you do, she'll either take offense or get bored and wander off. And what I find very interesting about that is that that's actually, as I think about it, quite similar to the role and I guess the social norms and pressures that many women in the U.S. and elsewhere find themselves in when they're talking to men. Don't be that overly opinionated woman. Don't disagree strongly. Don't have terribly strong opinions. All of those different things, which I think are fairly insidious in general when it comes to dating and gender norms, but are at the same time prolific and present in the vast majority of social dating interactions in people's teens, 20s, and 30s. So yeah, it's this interesting, confused, reversed situation. And actually, when I first got here, I would have girls that would come up and they would start hitting on me, and I didn't realize that they were actually hitting on me, because they were using a lot of those same techniques that I guess men would use in the U.S. On women. And my response was I guess similar to what a Danish girl's response is to it here, in that I would get argumentative or dismissive, and I just thought they were being bitchy. Only afterwards did I realize that they were actually attempting to hit on me. So an interesting dynamic, and of course alcohol plays a huge role in dating culture in Denmark. There's a wolfing hour, 3 to 4 o'clock, when everybody is absolutely trashed at the bars, and there's a prolific hookup culture that then all sorts of noise today, but that then leads to dating or casual hookups, and that is what's far more common, I would say, than traditional sit-down dinner dates. Although there's some pressure now recently, maybe from a cultural standpoint, to do more traditional dates, and I think those dates are more common, of course, as you get older. But we're talking getting into the 30s or 40s, not so much the teens, 20s, and 30s, early 30s. So it's a jumble. At some point, I will do another Denmark 101 video and perhaps be a little bit more thorough and specific, but hopefully that's an interesting insight, at least to what I've observed. I mean, it's always an evolution, figuring out gender roles and norms and dating culture within a set country. And I guess I rambled or meandered from talking about gender to dating, but hopefully you don't mind too much. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get a fun discussion going in the comments about this one. I think there's really good potential, and I'd love to hear your thoughts.